The world of animation has given us some of the greatest heroes in all of fiction, characters that from their designs to their actions embody and personify the goodness that lies in the best of us. Characters to look up to from the biggest and proudest to the smallest and bravest. Heroes that we remember when we have to find the will to stand against the coming darkness. The most important thing to remember about the story of a great hero is that we wouldn't be telling that story without a great villain. Dark and light will forever be at odds with one another. Every David must have their Goliath. Animation just gets this side of the story so right sometimes that some of these villains have crossed over into discussions of the greatest in cinematic history, and I'd like to take a moment to celebrate just a few of them. There's a lot to talk about here, so before I begin, I just want to say, this video is going to primarily focus on the villains of Western animation. No disrespect to the bad guys of anime, but at some point, they're gonna have to get their own video. Even then, by narrowing it down that much, there's still a lot to talk about, which means I'm inevitably going to miss someone's favorite villain in this video. If I do, please tell me about your favorite animated villain in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and feel free to check out my other video on animation if you're interested. And without further ado, let's look at some of these villains. Throughout this video, I'm going to highlight each villain's complexity, motivation, or style, and dive increasingly deeper, as well as address what I believe to be some of the key components to making a memorable animated bad guy. I'm going to look into some aesthetic traits like character design and voice acting, as well as address character traits like their motivations and backstory, as well as their relationship with the hero. And I think this all culminates in presence, how it feels when these characters come on screen. So I think the best place to start is with the simplest type of motivation. These villains are just bad and just love to be bad. They simply desire to rule the world or steal tons of money. While these types of villains aren't necessarily the most deep or complex from a writing standpoint, you can't deny there's something classic about them. These are the bad guys you imagined you were fighting when you were a kid playing pretend. These are the Saturday morning cartoon villains, here to cause trouble, be defeated, escape, and be back again next week. These are villains like Mumra from the Thundercats, Shredder and Krang from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Skeletor, and my personal favorite of them all, Megatron from the Transformers.
You've lost, Prime! The Decepticons have won!
Megatron's goal is as simple as you can get. Conquer the planet of Cybertron, and then the rest of the universe. In just about every single version of this character, that goal has been his driving force. Rarely is he ever explored any deeper. Megatron is just pure evil, refusing to take orders from anyone and standing above the Decepticons uncontested. In terms of character design and writing, Megatron is a perfect example of contrasting imagery. His glowing red eyes and darker color palette are the exact opposite of his nemesis, Optimus Prime. His utter contempt for human life can't match Prime's admiration for it. In every way, he is the perfect foil to the hero. Optimus treats his companions with respect, offering them wisdom and guidance, whereas Megatron insults and belittles those who are loyal to him, his superiority ultimately leading to his downfall in the Transformers movie. Here, he finally meets a being who is way more powerful than him, forcing him into a sidekick role for the first time and transforming him into Galvatron. Galvatron survives the events of the film and for the rest of the series returns to being the main antagonist, but becomes more interesting in that he's psychologically damaged from what he endured at the hands of Unicron. Galvatron is even more dangerous than Megatron because he's completely lost it. The vocal performance of the legendary Frank Welker as both Megatron and Galvatron is just perfect. He is the person that brought this character to life, and nobody in the almost 40 years of this franchise has done it better.
I would have waited an eternity for this. It's over, Prime.
Sometimes when your villain is this comedically simple, as a writer you have the option to make your villain comedic. The world of animation lends itself perfectly to funny bad guys. Pairing a silly design with an equally silly voice along with controlling every single frame for perfect slapstick timing can lead to comedy gold. An already funny movie, the majority of the laughs that I get from watching The Emperor's New Groove come from Yzma and Kronk. The maniacal insanity of Eartha Kitt perfectly clashes with the slow-witted but innocent Patrick Warburton perfectly. Anytime these two characters are on screen, I'm laughing.
Pull the lever, Kronk.
Going back further in Disney's catalog, we find Captain Hook, one of my personal favorite childhood bad guys. Disney found the perfect middle ground with this character, being introduced with appropriate menace so that he's not entirely a pushover, but at the same time, I think the writers saw the comedy potential of a pirate whose archenemy is a child. The slapstick humor here is top-notch. The further you look into more humorous villains, the more you start to see the scale sort of balance out a little bit. You get bad guys that are genuinely funny, but also still pose a threat to the main hero, and have moments where they should be taken seriously. DreamWorks excels at these types of characters. Titan is the funniest character in Megamind. His utter cluelessness and inability to talk to women is pathetically funny, and made even worse when he gets all the power he could ever want, exposing his true nature as a misogynistic egoist. As funny as Titan is, he's a very serious threat by the end of the movie. All of that insecurity with the powers of a superhero is not a good combo for anybody. Also from DreamWorks, Shrek 2 completely outdid the first movie by giving us the fairy godmother, a manipulative schemer who's been pulling the strings of the entire kingdom of Far Far Away for years, trying to gain power for her own family and completely willing to use her powers to warp the minds of everyone around her and destroy the happy ending of a much more deserving person to find her way to the top. The fairy godmother is the definition of evil lurking under a friendly facade. Evil to the core, but if she isn't the funniest and most entertaining character in the entire movie. If I'm going to have to pick what I think is the funniest animated villain to talk about, then I'm going to have to give it back to Disney with Hades from Hercules.
You know, I haven't been this choked up since I got a hunk of moussaka caught in my throat. Huh?
Hercules was already a very big stylistic and tonal change for Disney at the time. A bit more tongue-in-cheek satire of the Greek myth and this story of the hero's journey, and Hades is the embodiment of that. His design is genius. The pointed teeth, the flaming hair, and the darker color scheme that contrasts the glowing gods of Olympus. But what makes this character truly funny is in his characterization as more of a sleazy con man than as an all-powerful lord of the underworld.
Name is Hades, Lord of the Dead. Hi, how you doing?
Not now, okay?
When I first watched this movie, I truly felt that this character would not have worked as amazingly as he did if anybody but James Woods was playing him, and upon research, I ended up being right. James Woods' audition was what inspired the filmmakers to completely retool this character that was originally intended to be much more serious. Hades is just so much fun that, at points, he just steals the whole movie, becoming the entire reason I'm even watching it. I just can't get enough of him. The best moments are always when he loses his temper and his hair literally explodes with anger.
Aren't we forgetting one teensy-weensy but ever so crucial little tiny detail?
I own you!
As funny as Hades is, he never feels like a villain that shouldn't be taken seriously. He strikes the perfect balance between a wisecracking con artist and a force to be reckoned with perfectly. His full power being a real challenge for our hero to rise up to. He's a character that works just like the movie does, the dramatic moments hitting just as hard as the comedy for me. Hades works very well as an example of a subversive villain, one that doesn't quite fit the description of what is expected of him. This reminds me of another bad guy from one of my favorite movies of all time, another perfect example of a subversion of character tropes, which is kinda what the whole movie's about. If he was in any Disney movie from the Golden Age, Gaston would have been the hero, a dashing hunter with a booming voice and the masculinity to win the girl. But this is Beauty and the Beast, where conventional fairy tale characters are deconstructed, and where a man like Gaston is the most evil character in the film. I think character design is one of the key elements that can make an iconic antagonist, and Gaston works because the animators had to make him evil without designing him that way. The message of the story wouldn't have worked if Gaston suddenly became hideous halfway through the story. This is a case where, because Gaston is so handsome and muscular, he's even more egotistical. His misogynistic attitude is accepted by a town where that's simply how men should behave to get the girl and be admired. Gaston works because he contrasts our heroes. The Beast is a literal monster with fangs and claws, but with a heart and mind that are willing to change and grow to love. Gaston is the most handsome man in town, but with the ugliest heart. Belle has a creative, imaginative, and intelligent mind that wants to make more out of the life that she has, and Gaston is not very smart.
How can you read this? There's no pictures.
This actually leads me to another type of bad guy. Brute physical strength is one thing, but intelligence is another. A combination of both skills and smarts can be a very dangerous one. These are the manipulators, the liars, and the schemers. This is Ursula using Ariel's dream to be amongst humanity against her to bring down her father's kingdom. It's Dr. Facilier manipulating not only Prince Naveen, but his butler as well, promising them both what they've always wanted, so that he can have the power that he desires. It's the other mother showing Coraline a perfect fantasy world where everything goes her way just to trap her in her web and ultimately consume her like she has so many children before her. Film has many great examples to choose from, but I actually think the smaller screen is where we get the best examples of the intelligent villain. On TV, you can really see a genius villain's machinations play out over several episodes, or in some cases, several seasons. Out of all the bad guys the Teen Titans would face, none were more dangerous than Slade. Every time he appeared in the series, he always left the characters severely damaged in some way, specifically Robin. The psychological toll he took on the young hero was all in an effort to mold him into an apprentice, with one of the best episodes in the series exploring the damage that Slade does on Robin's mind. This, combined with his abuse of Tara, makes him one of the cruelest villains in all of television because he doesn't care what he has to do to achieve his goals. And those goals are carefully planned out. So much so that Slade rarely ever seems surprised at any upper hand the team gets on him, because he always seems to have a contingency. Ron Perlman's voice does so much service to the writing of this character. It's a hypnotic voice that can get inside your head.
Robin, that was vicious, dishonorable, and ruthless. Excellent work.
There are rare occasions where the greatest villain of a series is not even the main villain of the series. I'm now going to highlight one of my favorite antagonists of all time. A villain that has incredible intelligence along with incredible skill, but is made even more fascinating when we learn what acquiring such great mental ability cost her. Fire Lord Ozai may be the main antagonist of Avatar: The Last Airbender, but his daughter is the greatest villain in the entire show. Azula is the princess of the Fire Nation, younger sibling of Zuko, favorite child of the Fire Lord, and an absolute prodigy in every way. Her firebending skills are enough to make those with years of experience on her back away in fear, and even in situations where she literally does not have the ability to use her bending, she is still a force to be reckoned with. The greatest weapon that Azula has, however, is her mind, exemplified by her brutal use of words to spark fear in her subordinates and her tactics to manipulate people into willingly following her. Azula can spot weakness in anyone and use it to her ability in one way or another, as a means to defeat in combat or gain an uneasy ally. Ever the brilliant opportunist, this 14-year-old with only 2 companions walked into an impenetrable Earth Kingdom city, assessed its weaknesses, and completely overthrew it through careful calculation. And when she was faced with a skilled manipulator who held the power in the city for years before she was born, attempting to double-cross her, she won over his entire personal agency with just her words, her mind being the only display of power that she needed.
You've beaten me at my own game.
Don't flatter yourself. You were never even a player.
While the Fire Lord was the final boss of the series, Azula was the face of all the evil that those in power were capable of. Dangerous in every way imaginable. No matter how intense a blaze she could muster or deadly a bolt of lightning she could hurl, nothing was scarier than the way she could expose someone's mental weaknesses. Fighting her was one thing, but speaking to her was something else entirely.
My favorite prisoner used to mention you all the time. She was convinced you were going to come rescue her. Of course, you never came, and she gave up on you.
However, it's when we explore another aspect of Azula's character that we can see another way of writing a villain like this. Animated villains can become very complex characters the more we get to know them on a personal level. Everyone has a weakness, and nobody is perfect. This is common knowledge, but to someone who has been brought up their entire life to be perfect in every way, the slightest hint that they may not be can send them spiraling violently downward. Azula has everything: riches, power, skill, mind, and friends. Friends that she thinks she knows well. It's in the latter half of the final season of the show that we see a different side of Azula. She makes a mistake, a miscalculation of how loyal her friend will truly be. And when the reality sets in that most of the relationships in her life have been forged out of fear rather than genuine respect, she can only see the monster that she is inside. Even more so, the idea that this is a 14-year-old girl whose family has left her, used her, or fears her makes her fractured mental state by the end of the series all the more tragic. She is the perfect mirror to her older brother, who rises to his full potential by embracing friendship, while she plummets into depression by rejecting it. We now move to the antagonists that are the protagonists of their own story. By exploring the backstories of these characters, we find ourselves almost feeling sorry for them. These characters can also transform throughout the film, and end up more as fallen heroes in need of redemption. Meet the Robinsons had the bowler hat guy, a character that I almost lumped in with the comedic villain, and he is absolutely hilarious in how he's almost a parody of the mustache-twirling bad guy. However, toward the end of the story, it's revealed that all this person is just a child that was wronged by our hero and never moved on. He acts like this because he believes that's how bad people act. His pain leads to him being easily manipulated by the true villain of the story, and the film leaves him with a road to redemption, to move forward with his life. This is also the case for the villain of Moana, who is actually just a corrupted goddess whose heart was stolen from her. Both start as bad guys, but end redeemed. As nice as all that is, I want to look at those characters who aren't as fortunate to have a happy ending. The bad guys I have some sympathy for, but am ultimately left detested by their choices. The Kung Fu Panda series has two of animation's best antagonists, Tai Lung and Lord Shen. Of the two, Tai Lung is explored the deepest. We see that he was trained to be the Dragon Warrior and promised his entire life that he would be chosen, so when he was rejected, he felt denied his rightful destiny and lashed out. It's at the end of the film when he confronts Shifu that we hear in his own words that he's less hurt by the fact that he was denied, but more that he felt betrayed by his master that put the idea in his head that he was special. The master that told him since he was a child that he would be the greatest warrior in the land, only for that same master to not intervene on his behalf when he was rejected. Shifu is in the wrong, but in seeking violent revenge and power, so is Tai Lung. If you want a deeper analysis of this character better than I could do, Shay Frillis made an amazing video on this movie. Go check it out. In Kung Fu Panda 2, Lord Shen isn't explored as deeply, but still hits those emotions through his conversations with the fortune teller. Where Tai Lung was actually wronged, Lord Shen grew too ambitious at a young age, wiping out an entire village of pandas, believing that assuring his place in power was what his parents wanted, and when they were horrified and regretfully banished him, Shen saw this as a betrayal, and as proof that his parents hated him. This moment scarred him for life and turned him into the bitter monster that he becomes years later. In his final confrontation with Po, he expects Po to hold on to his pain as he did, letting it be his undoing. But when Po tells him that one can move on from the pains of their past, it's too late for Shen to understand that. Both of these villains are unable to move on, and that is what leads to their undoing. DreamWorks really is on another level with their villain writing. Some bad guys, just every time I watch the movie, I hope in vain that they will make the right choice, and they just never do. Lotso from Toy Story 3 is a villain that I just wanted so badly to realize the error of his ways. His past is tragic, but his reaction to it is far too extreme. His perceived abandonment turns him into a hate-filled dictator who projects his own replacement onto the only people who were by his side for so many years. Even when our main group of heroes saves his life, he still holds on to his hateful ideas and leaves them behind to burn. So close, yet so far.
We're all just trash, waiting to be thrown away. That's all a toy is.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. My favorite animated film of all time is The Prince of Egypt, and Ramses is an incredible villain. The story has been retold so many times, but only in this version do we really explore that Ramesses was a brother to Moses for most of his life, developing a genuine love for him that persists right up until the moment that Moses commands him to free the slaves. It's then that the weight of expectations that his father has placed on him drags him down to the ways of cruel tradition. With the movie spending so much of its opening with these two caring for one another, it truly hurts to watch this brotherhood be torn apart by the conclusion. Ramses loves his brother, but he made his choice to be a cruel slaver in the name of a father whose hands bore the blood of children. That shot of him screaming the one he once called brother's name on his knees in defeat drives home that this relationship is dead, and Ramses knows it's his fault.
Ramesses, please, you must listen.
I will not be the weak link.
The relationship between a hero and a villain can be the backbone of a powerful story. The rivalry between Batman and Joker has become more famous than the characters themselves. A hero and villain can exist symbiotically. One exists because of, or in spite of, the other. And since we're talking about superheroes, it makes sense to talk about one of the greatest hero-villain relationships in any movie.
Huh? Oh, come on! You gotta admit this is cool!
Syndrome would not exist if it weren't for Mr. Incredible. He's everything that a superhero in this universe shouldn't be, and a reminder of why Mr. Incredible and his family are such great heroes. I'm not the first person to make this point, but it's worth repeating that in any other story like this, Buddy would have been our protagonist, put down by everyone around him and finding the determination to do what they said he couldn't. Syndrome is a perversion of the Pixar lead character. He sees himself as an underdog, and it's understandable to an extent. He just wanted to be a sidekick and fight crime, but for all the wrong reasons. He wanted the recognition and the glory rather than just the satisfaction of saving a life. After being rejected by his hero, instead of working hard to become better, he decided to bring the world to his level, killing superheroes with a robot designed to do so that only he can beat in a fake show of heroics, with his ultimate goal being to capitalize on heroics by selling it, knowing full well that by doing this, he will devalue what it means to use your abilities to do good. Syndrome is the dark side of Mr. Incredible. They ultimately both want the same thing, the return of the superhero into the public eye. Where they differ is that Mr. Incredible wants heroes to return to make the world a better place, while Syndrome wants them to return only for them to be seen by everyone the same way that he saw his hero, as nothing special at all. All of this as a result of a 15-year grudge by a jaded fanboy. One of the most superb examples of a hero-villain relationship. I've been slowly building up to some of the big bads in animation here. The next few that I'm going to discuss, you probably know pretty well. They're also probably the ones you've been waiting for me to get on with it and talk about this entire time. And that's with very good reason. Simply put, they're iconic. In some cases, they're more memorable than the heroes of their movies. With that said, I think it's a good time to ask the question that partly inspired me to write this video. Why don't we have any memorable animated movie villains anymore? I'm sure I'm not the only one that's thinking that. It seems like it's been so long that we've gotten a bad guy that we can talk about at length as much as we do the hero in an animated movie. In looking over my examples, I think the answer to that question comes down to one single word: presence. There's a reason why there has been such a negative reaction to the latest trend of having a twist villain in our animated films. These bad guys just lack any real presence in both ways. The first being in character design and feeling when they're on screen, and the second being their influence on the actual story. There's this new emphasis on wanting to surprise the audience with the identity of the antagonist, and that's not inherently a bad thing, but it leads to some very mediocre and forgetful bad guys because they can't show off the things that make them unique throughout the film, as they have to play at being another person for the majority of it. We don't get the time to enjoy these characters being bad. I want you to go back to your favorite Disney Renaissance movie and see if you notice the same thing that I noticed on rewatch. In regards to the villains, they are very important to the story, and most of the time are given more attention in the first act of the story than our hero is. And now I'm going to talk about some of the bad guys you've been waiting for. Did you notice that in Aladdin, Jafar appears on screen before the titular character? Every single element of this story is directly influenced by Jafar. It's his search for the diamond in the rough that leads him to Aladdin. It's his manipulation of the Sultan that leads to the urgency of Jasmine needing to marry a prince. And it's his actions that directly lead to our hero finding the lamp and the genie. You cannot tell this story without Jafar, because he is the reason that the story happens. Jafar has presence in the actual narrative of the film and presence when he appears on screen. Just look at that character design. You know who the bad guy is from the first shot of him, and that's okay because it is okay to have an obvious villain. He stands tall over every other character when he enters the scene. His shadow swallows people at points. They use the animation of this character to convey how evil he is, and of course, you've got the voice.
Bring me the lamp. The rest of the treasure is yours, but the lamp is mine.
Jonathan Freeman absolutely kills it. Slimy and pompous when he's acting as the vizier, and completely unhinged when he finally has the power of the genie. He's evil, and he loves being evil, and that is why you remember Jafar. After Aladdin, we got this little movie, you might have heard of it, I think it's called The Lion King. Everybody remembers the iconic intro of the movie. It's powerful and moving and quickly establishes the theme of the circle of life. It does all of it without any dialogue and just the visuals and music. Immediately after this, we get the introduction of Scar.
Life's not fair, is it?
Jafar appeared before Aladdin, and Scar speaks before any other character. The first character we really get to know in The Lion King is Scar, and the reason for this is because, like Jafar, Scar is the entire reason that this story takes place. It's in his plotting against his own brother and nephew for the throne that he thrusts our younger hero into danger and sets the events of the story in motion. There's a few interesting things that set Scar apart from so many other villains. Firstly, he is kind of a twist villain. Not to us, though. To the audience, he is very clearly the bad guy. His character design, voice, and musical cues all indicate that. The realization that he is a villain doesn't come as a shock to us, but to the other characters, because Scar is a master manipulator. He acts like a caring uncle concerned for the well-being of Simba when he needs to, never going too far as to be so obviously untrustworthy. The other thing that sets Scar apart is that he wins. Scar kills Mufasa and assumes the throne. His plan works pretty much flawlessly, and even though his henchmen fail to kill Simba, it's his manipulation to make the cub believe that he's responsible for his father's death that leads him to stay away from Pride Rock for so long. Scar is the disruption of the circle of life. Everything is thrown out of balance because of him. As a bad guy, Scar is pretty much perfect. Do I really even need to talk about how good of a job Jeremy Irons does here?
Don't turn your back on me, Scar.
Oh no, Mufasa. Perhaps you shouldn't turn your back on me.
You couldn't have casted this character any better. Scar is a combination of many of the kinds of antagonists I've talked about before. He has moments of comedy here and there, he's family to Simba, so his betrayal hits that much harder, and he is extremely intelligent. Even at the very end, he's choosing to speak rather than fight to save himself. But it's his animation that really stands out. His facial expressions carry so much of who he is in the subtlest of changes. We rarely see him out in broad daylight. He's usually underneath shadow or haze, and in the iconic Be Prepared musical sequence, they bathe him in greens and reds, while also utilizing fascist imagery to really drive home just how evil he is. Just like Jafar, Scar loves doing what he does, and that's indicated by these fabulous poses in the same song. Scar is just one of the greats. There's no denying it. But if we're keeping score, let's say, of how many evil things a villain in a Disney movie does, then I think that my personal favorite Disney villain takes it by a long shot. Judge Claude Frollo from The Hunchback of Notre Dame, in his first few minutes on screen, murders a woman on the steps of the Notre Dame Cathedral and attempts to drown her deformed child, only being stopped because of his fear of God. He begrudgingly acknowledges that he did anything wrong after attempting to deny it, before finally deciding to raise the child as his own, with the hope of him someday being useful in the future. Every day, Frollo reminds Quasimodo of the horrible life that he has, repeatedly telling him that he is ugly and that he has no place in this world without Frollo being there to provide it. Frollo is a study in religious hypocrisy, a corrupt government official claiming that he is righteous in everything that he does under the protection of the church. He sees himself as above everyone else. His very first appearance is shown from a low angle while he rides atop a terrifying-looking horse. He towers over the people that he endlessly persecutes. With everything he did to Quasimodo still in mind, he just gets worse in his actions. What really sets Frollo apart from everyone else, though, is that we actually get an extended look into his mind. The character of Esmeralda brings out an even worse side of Frollo, because what's worse than a crazy, murderous, politically corrupt religious nut? A lustful, crazy, murderous, politically corrupt religious nut. Frollo becomes obsessed with Esmeralda in one of the rare occasions where Disney makes it explicitly clear the evil sexual desires of a villain. The entire latter half of this film is Frollo hunting down Esmeralda to give her the choice between burning at the stake or God knows what kind of stuff he's into. And I mean that literally. God knows what Frollo is into because he sings about it in the single greatest song ever sung by a villain in any movie ever, Hellfire. In a horrifyingly beautiful display of animated brilliance, we dive into the psychology of this character, his devout faith pulling him one way and his desires pulling him another. In this song, he blames everyone but himself for both what he's done wrong and what he is going to do. You could never have done this in live action. The brilliance of this entire sequence comes entirely from the animation. In The Hunchback of Notre Dame, the villain is explored way more than any of the heroes, and while he is the worst human being ever, he is the most fascinating to watch.
And he shall smite the wicked and plunge them into the fiery pit.
When doing research for this video, it seemed harder and harder to find great characters like this from more recent productions. Animated films lately, for one reason or another, seem to be lacking a true antagonist that can reach that level of status like those I've mentioned before. With the last few Disney movies having either completely forgettable antagonists or no real antagonist at all, choosing instead to focus on the drama of the lead character, I kinda quit expecting to go to a theater and experience a villain that gave me the same feeling that the old school ones did. And then, from one of the most unlikely sources, we got one again. In a sequel to a movie that most people had forgotten about, from a studio whose last few movies were kinda underwhelming for me, we got a new iconic bad guy. If you've been on the internet since this movie premiered, you already know what character I'm going to talk about. The wolf in Puss in Boots: The Last Wish is such a refreshing return to form for animated villains while also offering something unique. Spoiler warning if you haven't seen the movie yet. This is a very fun adventure comedy that actually has other villains that are more directly related to the overall plot. Each of them is fun in their own way, but this absolute monster of a villain is only concerned with one thing: to psychologically torment and then kill our main character. This is all he wants, and when he is first introduced as a bounty hunter, we assume that the reason is simply because it would make him the best and earn him a financial reward. But it's later revealed that this isn't just some crazy bounty hunter. This character is the physical manifestation of death itself. Death wants to claim our hero's last life because he laughed in Death's face by wasting all of his others. By this character being present in the story, it elevates the film from an incredibly animated action comedy about people racing to a wishing star to a meditation on the inevitability of death. Every single time this character appears on screen, the tone shifts, and the toll that he has taken on our main character is displayed in horrifically animated sequences where our hero experiences panic attacks. The presence of this character in this world looms over the movie. We know he's out there, and when he appears, the movie makes a spectacle of it. You could not have pulled this off in live action. When you hear that whistle and see that silhouette, you know it's about to get serious. His character design, his voice, and his on-screen presence have already given Death his spot as one of the most intimidating animated villains in movie history. But where he really earns his place in this video for me is how he affects our hero, because after everything he puts Puss in Boots through, our hero still finds the strength to accept death and confront it head-on, choosing to live his last life to the fullest. And that's truly the sign of a great villain, isn't it? Animators put everything they have into making these characters look and behave as evil as possible. Every drawing or rendering is done with the intent of giving our hero their ultimate challenge, and it's in the final moments of all of these stories that our heroes must face the representation of their opposing values, their inner darkness, or their greatest fears. Because for our heroes to become great, they must first overcome a great villain. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it, and again, if I left out one of your favorite bad guys, please tell me all about them in the comments below. Consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video.